Hello and welcome to the Sugarcoated Marketing Podcast, where you get sweet advice on how to improve your marketing and grow your business. I am David Paris, your host, and in this podcast series, I interview top experts who give advice on the subjects of marketing, copywriting, advertising, and we even throw in a hint of self-development. Today, we have an incredible interview lined up with Brian Kurtz of Titans Marketing. Over a 35-year career, Brian has been responsible for sending out billions of promotions in all forms of media and has sold millions of subscriptions and books using state-of-the-art direct response techniques. Brian has worked with some of the best copywriters and marketers that have ever lived. In this interview, he shares some of the techniques he uses, such as the Bloodhound Approach to personal branding and how to be congruent in your marketing. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. Thanks for having me on. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing here, and I have a feeling that a lot of the stuff that I've experienced in my career could be useful to your audience today. I hope so. Anyway, that's the reason why I'm here, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. With marketing and copywriting, you are one of those people, at least to people that have studied marketing and copywriting, that don't really need an introduction because of your experience and renowned in the industry, especially being able to work personally with Eugene Schwartz. So I'm excited to have you on the show.
But I think you said that a lot of people listening may not even know what copywriting is or what the definition would be. Do you want to kind of get down to the basics and why copywriting and why it even exists, or do we want to jump right into something else? Because I think it might be useful, the value of great copy. I mean, I was an English major. My parents sent me to college and were very unhappy I was an English major. When I came out and I said I'm going to learn how to read and write, they still weren't that happy, but I was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think no one better to explain it than you.
Yeah, so, this idea of copywriting, writing, whether you're writing for a magazine or you're writing novels or you're doing promotional copywriting for marketing messages, I'm not going to say writing is writing because it's all different styles and different things, but the one universal about the best writers I know, not just copywriters for marketing materials, is passion. People who are really passionate about what they're writing about, it comes through in their writing. The best people who write novels, if they're a mystery writer, they have a passion for mystery writing. If they, are writing biographies, they love doing biographies. If they love writing direct response copy, copy that is geared to getting people to respond to an offer, they're usually very, very passionate about getting that response. And then I'll take it a step further. The best copywriters I ever met are very interested in going a mile deep as opposed to a mile wide, at least initially. And what I mean by that is that if, say, they want to write about health is just so general. But I know the people, like, for instance, I know a copywriter who had a lot of cancer in his family, or in her family in this case, and felt that she really wanted to become an expert in writing about cancer treatments and things like that. And obviously becoming an expert in that one area, taking that deep dive, as I like to say, and then eventually, becoming the best copywriter she could be in writing about alternative cancer, opened her up to then do other types of alternative health treatments for other diseases. I think she ended up doing some stuff on home remedies and things like that. So it's this idea of going narrow to wide that I just wanted to emphasize here, that, when you try to be all things to all people in anything you do in life, look, some people can do it. As a guru like Tony Robbins can be a guru to everybody. But I think the people that are gurus to a very small slice of the population first and then expand out, just like a good copywriter is a copywriter with an expertise in a very narrow area and then expands out. I always find those people have a lot more depth and a lot more skill in how they do their craft. So again, without getting into more detail on copywriters and copywriting, I think that, writing is certainly a skill, but the umbrella around all writing is passion for me.
Absolutely. It's really difficult to create a brand around something that you yourself are not excited about.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my buddies, Dean Graziosi, who is a world great author. He's been on sold a lot of real estate courses on TV, and now he's doing a lot of personal development stuff. And he always says things like, if you don't have this incredible fire in your belly to get what your mission or vision is out to the world, go find something else. Selling something you don't really care about. And again, whether you're a copywriter, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're just a marketer, you got to have that fire in the belly. Like, I got to get this out to the world at all costs. And in fact, a lot of my mentors, one of which Jay Abraham, who's pretty well known in marketing circles, always would say to me, Brian, it's your moral responsibility to, kind of get this information that you want to get out there as a direct. I'm a direct marketing educator, but if I'm not passionate about what I'm talking about and I don't have a fire in my belly about it, go do something else. It's and again, it's easy for me to say because a lot of people have line jobs and they've got to do what they have to do. But ultimately, there's something that just really jazzes us, and even if it's not what we do for our vocation, if it's something that you can do as something extra in your life, go with that fire in your belly wherever you can. And so, the best copywriters, the best marketers, the best entrepreneurs I know who are, out there sharing their vision or mission with the world, it's always about being in love with what they're doing. And so, yeah, it sounds a little corny, now that I'm saying it, and I'm trying not to listen to myself, but it is a little corny. But boy, I just don't know of anybody who's been a great marketer, copywriter in the scheme, in the places where I've traveled over the last 35 years that didn't have that passion and that fire in the belly for what they were doing.
There was something that you mentioned there that caught my attention, and it was the word moral responsibility. I think today there is a negative connotation with marketing, maybe because there's a lot of people that are doing it the wrong way and promoting bad things. But from the standpoint of moral responsibility, one of the things we talked about earlier was that marketing in and of itself is actually a good thing where you're helping people get to what they want faster, and it's not like a evil or a manipulative thing, or something that's actually a negative. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. So I went to this past fall. I went to Hungary, Budapest, Hungary, and it was a conference of entrepreneurs in Hungary. Now, people would say there are no entrepreneurs in Hungary. That nation was communist up until 1989. Well, there's a budding group of entrepreneurs, and the guy who is leading that movement in Hungary invited me over there to speak, and he said, Brian, I really want you to speak to my up-and-coming entrepreneurs in Hungary about marketing and how important marketing is. And these people are afraid of marketing. They think marketing is about picking someone's pocket. They think it's about, extracting cash from people is evil. And so I started my presentation, and the title of my presentation, as a matter of fact, was Marketing Isn't Everything, It's the Only Thing. And it's sort of a play on the expression that's kind of attributed to the football coach, Vince Lombardi, who said, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. Although, so I looked it up on Wikipedia. It's not, someone else said it before Vince Lombardi. But this idea of marketing isn't everything, it's the only thing. I basically, got in front of this group of Hungarian entrepreneurs, and I asked them 3 questions. The first question was, do you have something you really want to get out to the world from Budapest, from somewhere in Hungary, whether it's in Hungarian or English or in another country, and do you want it that you really want to share with the world? And surprisingly, not everybody raised their hand, which then my second question was, how many of you never raise your hand at any conference when someone asks you to raise your hand? And so then everybody kind of sheepishly raised their hands. Because here's a group of entrepreneurs in Hungary, they wouldn't be coming to a conference to learn about marketing from, this ugly American. if they didn't have something they wanted to share with the world. So it didn't make sense that they all wouldn't be raising their hands. And then my third question was, wouldn't you rather reach millions of people than dozens of people? And so then I tried to get them to understand, and then I did it in 3 segments, and I talked about, marketing is not evil, and I made the case for that every one of them can market themselves or their product or their service within a comfort zone that is congruent. I call it congruent marketing. That's congruent with who they are and who they want to represent in the world. And so, they don't have to do marketing like the marketing they've seen that they don't like. They can do the marketing that they want to do and want to like to do, and it's going to be consistent and congruent with who they are and what they want to be. So I spent a good chunk of time on this idea that, kind of making the case that marketing is not evil. Then I talked about specialization being important, which I mentioned already on this interview, that the idea of narrow to wide, that niche is way more important than trying to be everything, all things to all people. And then the third thing was clearly, giving them some building blocks of marketing that, when you start talking about things like customer lifetime value, that I want to get my customers to love me forever, and I want to over-deliver to my customers and give them more than they ever would have expected, you're starting to have a conversation that doesn't sound like I'm trying to sell more crap to them. No, it sounds like I'm having a conversation that says, I want to create a tribe. I want to create people around me that want to hear my message and buy my products. And I want them to be with me for a long time and not for the short term, which is all about the kind of marketing that I teach. So, by putting it in the context of people in Hungary who don't know anything about marketing, I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this call are people who've either done marketing in the past or are not. They don't think marketing is evil, but they do think that there are certain techniques that rub them the wrong way. And all I will say to you is, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Don't make the assumption that every technique that's being used by any marketer today, online or offline, is evil because you don't like it, or because you think it's deceptive, or you think it doesn't have integrity, or you think it's not consistent with the voice that this whoever is selling to you should have. That's your opinion. But if you're now in the marketer's chair or the entrepreneur's chair or the copywriting chair, and you're out there putting your stuff out into the marketplace, I think it behooves you to think about, how can I do this and feel great about it? How can I do this and sleep at night? How can I do this and not feel dirty and not feel like this is evil? And I'll give you a quick example, which I think will really illustrate this in a big way. And I think for the people who are listening to this who are saying, well, this guy, Brian Kurtz, he just sent out a lot of junk mail, and, he was a kind of a marketing whore, and he sold anything to anybody. And they can think that. I'm okay with that. And I wear it like a badge of honor. But I did it in a way that I know it always had integrity, and it was consistent with the brand that I was selling, and it still is in my new brand. So there was a guy I knew that had a list. He was kind of a woo-woo spiritual type guy. He was selling all kinds of daily wisdom for people to kind of help them deal with each day, and be present and being grateful and all that kind of stuff. And so he would send out like a thing of the day, to get people moving on their day, like a daily tip. And then he started advertising other things to his list, to his people. His people really loved him. And he started advertising things to his people. And he advertised things like meditation programs from a friend of his, and a yoga exercise program from another friend of his. And his audience was fine with it, because these were things that he practiced himself, and they were consistent and congruent with who he was. And he was able to make money doing it, which enabled him to keep doing what he was doing for his audience. And so what's wrong with all of that? So, what's wrong with this picture? I don't think anybody listening would say anything is wrong with this picture. He's helping people, as you said, in areas that are consistent with what he teaches. But then one day he was approached by somebody to do something in the investment area, financial investments, and it was not someone who was obviously he knew very well, but the person offered him a lot of money to sell a financial offer to this list of people he had been selling, we'll call it meditation, yoga, and daily personal development tips. And lo and behold, he puts this offer out to his list, and his list revolted. And the revolt was such that, I don't know what percentage of people unsubscribed from his list, but it was a huge number. And the reason why I tell this story is that it's a cautionary tale that said this guy was in a good zone. He was marketing. He was making money selling these other products, and he started selling his own products. But as soon as he did something where his audience said, well, wait a minute, this doesn't fit with the personal brand. This doesn't fit with who we thought this guy was. And so it's an extreme example of sorts, but I think it really illustrates the point that he crossed over some line. I mean, you don't know it when you see it, and I'm sure when he made the decision to promote the personal finance or the investment offer, he probably said to himself, hey, my audience needs to understand this stuff if they have money. But it was not in the right context. It was not congruent to what he had been doing with them all along. So I think that's a pretty good example of, what I'm talking about here. And if you stay true to yourself and true to what your mission is, I don't think you're going to fall into traps of people saying, wow, this person is a marketing whore. And I will tell you this, people will always unsubscribe. People will always feel like you crossed over a line. One person's great selling message is another person's perception that you're some kind of shyster of some sort. And you know what? If you don't have any unsubscribes and you don't have anybody who's unhappy, you're probably not pushing the envelope hard enough anyway on the stuff that you really care about. So it's a road that a lot of entrepreneurs who are not comfortable with marketing are afraid to cross. But I do think that with the right counsel and the right consulting and the right copywriting and the right branding, it all works. It can really work. And that's where the moral responsibility comes in. Because if you sit back and just wait for people to buy your stuff, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that too is also something that everyone forgets about the whole purpose of building the quote unquote marketing funnel is to get people to get off your list so that you get to the core people that you really resonate with, that really fall in love with you and your product.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need people around you, and not just marketers, but you need people around you coaching you all the time in your superpower. And what I mean by that is that, you need people to keep reminding you, hey, David, you said, I think you said you have a music studio, so I assume you're a musician. Is that something that you're passionate about?
Yeah, I actually have a business in the guitar niche. I have a business partner in California that makes some guitar parts and
Nice.
pickups, and then I have a website called findyournextguitar.com. Initially, when I put it together, I didn't expect to turn it into a business, and it basically was a collection of all the stuff that I had learned as a beginner guitarist that took me years to learn. That was stuff that was really frustrating, and the whole goal of creating the site was to simplify it for beginner musicians.
Right. So I think that my point would be that you want to be surrounded by people who are constantly reminding you. Look how you just went off on talked about it, because that shows me you have passion. You weren't selling to me just now. You were basically showing me and the audience that you love this thing. This thing called the music that you want to share with the world, or the things that you've learned that you want to share with the world. And you need people around you to constantly remind you that that's a superpower that you should be sharing on a regular basis. So I have people around me all the time, reminding me when I get kind of lazy or I get complacent and they say, Brian, it's time to write another blog post about something you did at Boardroom that could help people. Or Brian, it's time to write your next book. Or Brian, it's time to, form another mastermind group for up and coming marketers and copywriters, because it's up to you. You can't just wait for the next generation to be born and to learn. You're the one that's going to teach them. And so I got a lot of mentors and a lot of coaches who are constantly reminding me of my superpowers, whatever they might be, and that it's a crime that if I don't share it, again, that's the moral responsibility piece. And so, it's a combination of you having the superpower and then having people around you to constantly remind you that not sharing it is a crime, and then taking it a step further to learn as much as you can about marketing, presentation, different ways that you can do it that are congruent with who you are and who you want to be.
I would have to agree with those people that it would be a crime for you not to share it, because I've personally benefited from a lot of the stuff that you've done. It's definitely helped me to become a better marketer and copywriter. One of the things is just having you republish Breakthrough Advertising.
Actually, I found his other Gene Schwartz's other classic, Brilliance Breakthrough, which right now is sitting on Amazon for almost $8,000 for used copy, and getting the rights to that. I'll make a little money on it, but boy, bringing a classic like that, and bringing back Breakthrough Advertising, that's all consistent. You can see that it's totally consistent with me being this bridge. I kind of put myself in this position because I've declared it so many times that I'll be the bridge between what's, the eternal truths of direct marketing, and bridge that into the present, and then it goes on into the future. And, I've got to be around a lot of state-of-the-art internet marketers who are a lot smarter than me to be able to teach them what I know, so they'll teach me what they know. It's a little, I got to tell you, I've been in the business 35 years. I sit in a lot of rooms and feel very intimidated by the dexterity with which so many marketers today use technology, use the internet. And I'm not a Luddite. I love the internet. I use a lot of online techniques myself, but, that's not what I grew up with. So I'm sort of learning and teaching at the same time. And, I think that's going to keep going until I'm dead. I don't think I'll ever, I think when you stop learning, you kind of die. And that's why the concept of retirement is such a crazy concept to me, because, I just want to retire from things I don't like to do, retire from things I don't do well, and retire from people I don't want to hang around with anymore. And on that definition, I could definitely be retired right now. I'm not quite there yet, but it's just continuing to live something out, because once I see it all the time. The people who I grew up with in direct marketing who kind of gave up when the internet came along, and they died spiritually, if not figuratively. Some of them died spiritually, figuratively. Some of them died literally because they were just old and they were done, which was sad because I had a lot of mentors who were a lot older than me. So I'm always kind of sad thinking about how many mentors I have who are no longer with us. But it's the people who are my age. I'm 58. There's a lot of people around my age who grew up the same way I did in direct marketing, who basically are looking to figure out how to retire and how not to deal with this internet thing, and who grew up in offline marketing. And I find that really kind of difficult in a way.
I'm actually a little surprised by that, especially that you would be somewhat intimidated by some of the newer guys, just because I think the thing that I'm not all of them, and definitely not.
It might be the wrong word, but I will say I'm in awe. I'm in awe of how they use the technology, for incredible. They apply the principles of direct response marketing with technology in a way that I never could have imagined, and I'm blown away by it. So maybe I'm more in awe than intimidated.
Yeah, because I was gonna say with that, I know that most of the top guys use the core principles of direct response, but especially in the
mid to early 90s and even into the 2000s and more so now, there are a lot of people doing internet marketing that have never even heard of copywriting and they don't have a clue what they're doing. And some of them hit home runs by accident because maybe they created a stage 5 brand, or they just hit a key pain point, but they really don't have a clue what they're doing, and then they're teaching that to other people. And it's interesting because that was one of the greatest things that I think that you've done recently is release your book, The Advertising Solution. I haven't read the entire thing yet. I've had it for about 3 months, and the reason I haven't read it yet is because I keep going back and rereading different pages and taking notes because of stuff that I've forgot or new stuff that I learned. Especially with going into Claude Hopkins' book, Scientific Advertising, the way that it's written in your book is in clearer English to me. And for those,
that was something that I was very, very. I'm glad you noticed that, because what Craig Simpson, my co-author, and I did is he gave me a manuscript where he kind of did the heavy lifting, pulling stuff out of these greats from. And just so the listeners know, the 6 legends that we profile in the book are Claude Hopkins, author of Scientific Advertising; David Ogilvy, kind of the father of advertising; Robert Collier, who wrote the classic book on sales letters; John Caples, who wrote Tested Advertising Methods and sort of the father of testing; Gary Halbert, the godfather of copywriting; and then Gene Schwartz, my personal mentor in copywriting and human behavior and all of that good stuff. And what's interesting is that all 6 of these guys were considered to be general advertisers, since, look, Claude Hopkins wrote Scientific Advertising in 1923. Not one word's been changed. It's 100% relevant. So, but the other side of it is they're writing in a time where there is no internet. It's a little dated, but they were all kind of direct marketers trapped in general advertiser bodies. And what I mean by that is that they all understood that getting a measurement from your advertising, which is what direct marketing is, was something that was critically important. And that's sort of what they all had in common. And what's interesting, speaking about, when Craig gave me the manuscript, it was so dense because he had to pull all this stuff out. And I said, Craig, we've got to turn this book into checklists. The idea for me would have been the book would sit next to a marketer, entrepreneur, copywriter's desk, next to the thesaurus and the dictionary. And so when they're looking at a promotion, a headline, a sales letter, they could pull out the book and look at all the lists of things. So I put everything into bullet points and lists so that it became sort of a what's missing checklist of what needs to be part of the offer, part of the how we're presenting this product to the marketplace. And so I'm glad you noticed that, because we wanted to take stuff from very, very dense books that I don't think marketers today would ever pick up. I don't think anyone would be picking up Scientific Advertising, Tested Advertising Methods, maybe not even Breakthrough Advertising, which would be a crime. But assuming that they wouldn't pick those books up right away, Craig and I had to deliver a book that kind of got the greatest hits, because this stuff is just too good, too important. It's just critical stuff. And it's true today. And everywhere in the book where I could, I tried to say, well, this is not just about talking about direct mail or a print ad. This is about, this is all about, you can adapt everything we're talking about here to the internet.
Yeah, and it's actually basically exactly what you said. It's become a guide for me. It sits on my desk right next to me for when I write, and I've got a bunch of sticky tabs all throughout it with notes. And it's a perfect reference because, and not so much just the books. Some of those books are a little bit older and harder to read, but because it's all in one place. One of the things in particular I was really surprised with was the word showmanship. I would have never guessed that was something that came from the early 1900s. I thought it was a more modern term, but it was interesting to see that comes from one of the legends in the book. I believe it was Robert Collier.
Yeah, I mean, the showmanship stuff was fascinating because we talk so much about, you know, with so many of my clients today who are online, but they don't think about, for example, the people on their list that spend the most money with them and creating three-dimensional mailings for them, what Dan Kennedy would call shock and awe packages. And the idea of really investing in your best customers and actually sending them a FedEx package with, a book or something, the idea of getting it opened is not just about sending a million pieces of junk mail. It could be about sending 10 pieces of targeted, personalized Federal Express envelopes, and that's direct mail too. And so one of the huge takeaways when you read that stuff about showmanship in the book is all the different ways that you can get attention, and whether you're trying to get attention at a low price or a high price in terms of how much the promotion is going to cost should be directly proportional to how much that person has spent with you. And you should always treat your best customers very differently than your suspects or your prospects. And you want to move them up to your best customers, but there's a lot to learn from these masters of showmanship, for sure. That's a really great concept in the book.
Yeah, with that, I think this would be a good place to maybe transition on how to use that to create a brand or a personal brand for your business.
Yeah, so, when at Boardroom, when my company for 34 years, we had like a panel of experts for all of our publications and books. So we had like all the best experts in finance and in medicine and all these other people, but there wasn't like one voice. So what we did is that we did a concept that you reminded me that I talked about in the book, which is called the Bloodhound concept. And so what the Bloodhound concept did, and it's something that people can use for personal branding, is that if you don't have the direct superpower yourself, or you're not the guru, but you're the guy or the woman who could go find all the experts in a particular area and be almost like Larry King would be a bloodhound, for example. In Boardroom's case, Marty Edelston was a bloodhound. One of the great newsmen who was a great friend of mine, Hugh Downs, he was a bloodhound. He would go find the people to talk to. 60 Minutes is a bloodhound show, right? Mike Wallace and Ed Bradley and those guys, and then all the new, and Wally Safer, and then all the new people, they're not the experts themselves, but they're seeking out the experts. So that was a great concept, and in terms of building the brand called Boardroom, and then it became Bottom Line, which was the newsletter we published. It was really about Marty Edelston, who was the founder of the company, as the bloodhound, that I'm going to find you the best person on estate planning. I'm going to find you the best person on tax planning. I'm going to find you the best person on alternative health. And by doing all of that, he became himself the personal brand of Bottom Line Personal. So that's a way to do it. Now, what's ironic is that I left Boardroom 2 years ago, and then it became, okay, I'm going to be a direct marketing educator now. I'm going to take everything I learned in marketing the Boardroom products and now be an educator for direct marketers in the industry. But the best way to do that was to use myself as the personal brand. But I stand on the shoulders of giants. So here I have this book, and I talked about those 6 legends, but I'm talking to you today as someone who has 35 years experience and the education from those 6 legends and, hundreds of other legends, some of which were personal mentors of mine. And now the personal brand becomes, I hate being called a guru because I don't look at myself that way, but I do look at myself as a personal brand, Brian Kurtz, serial direct marketer, with all of this experience that I want to share with the world from all of the experts that I've learned from. And so, just my own personal journey, in both cases, there was a branding that took place at my old company without, with a single voice, but the single voice was a bloodhound. And now I'm part bloodhound, part, personal brand myself, and that's another way to skin it. But there's always, the keys to doing it right. I always refer to one of my, somebody who I I revere in the industry, Robert Cialdini. And anybody who hasn't read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini, and his new book is quite good too, which is called Persuasion. And he was the father of persuasion and influence and all of that. And the beauty of Cialdini is that he really got everything down to like the essence of the principles, that there are 6 basic things. And if you look at your personal brand, some of these 6 will have to be present. And those are people who haven't read Influence. The 6 are reciprocation, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, making friends to influence people, and consensus. And when you're developing any kind of a brand or a personal brand, you want to have a bunch of those in place. So, I may not do a reciprocation in my personal branding. I don't do much of scarcity either. I don't use the scarcity argument, but I definitely use authority. I want to show people that I know what I'm talking about. I want to prove it with stories. And by the way, Cialdini also says something fascinating, which is people cannot argue stories. They can argue premises. They can argue opinions. I could tell you, like, direct marketing is better than general advertising, and you can argue with me about that. But if I tell you a story about how a measurable campaign in direct marketing outperformed a general advertising campaign because of the measurability, and I gave you specifics, you can't argue with my story. Another, liking is very important for me. Consistency. We talked about consistency in terms of personal branding. And so, there's a lot of ways to build your personal brand, right? That, there's no one way to do it, but I think using some combination of those, principles of ethical influence, I think is a great way to look at it. And it's when I didn't think about that when I was doing it, but then I realized that being such a student of Cialdini, I realized that I actually was using authority and consistency, which is the congruence piece. I was using a lot of things that he taught to build my own personal brand.
I'm really glad that you said that. I'm also a huge fan of Robert Cialdini. I first read Influence, I think, when I was 18 or 19, my first or second year of college. Probably my favorite principle from the book is social proof, because at the time I was actually a magician, so it really helped with a lot of that stuff, because when you understand the principles, one of the things I did as a magician that really freaked people out was you go into a restaurant or something, and say the hostess or waiter seats you, and you could say something to him like, I feel like we have a really strong connection. Is your name Michael or something like that? 99% of the time, people forget they're wearing a name tag, and you just blew their mind. And it's interesting how all of that stuff works. And even more so with what you were talking about with the Bloodhound approach, that's actually really what I'm doing with this podcast, as well as what I did in the guitar industry. And it's interesting how that panned out, because with the Find Your Next Guitar podcast, basically I had used Showmanship to reach out to professional musicians, and I got a few of them to come on the show. And once I had a few of them through social proof, I was able to get more people. And that led me all the way to being connected with bands like Smash Mouth, and other bands like that, as well as bigger guys in the industry. And that's actually how I ended up meeting Joshua, my business partner, because we had a mutual friend in New York. And initially we met because I interviewed him for the podcast.
Wow. Amazing, right? I can get really cliched here, be nice to the people on the way up, to the same people on the way down, put positive stuff into the universe and good stuff comes back. I have my own thing about 100-0, which is, give without expectation, and you always get a lot more, even when you're not expecting it. There's all kinds of stuff. And I think that it's funny, we've come full circle on this whole idea of, being consistent and using Cialdini's term consistent, what I use is congruent, but being, once you're there, the integrity is just obvious to everybody who sees it, reads it, feels it, and my litmus test is, how well do I sleep at night? And once I fall asleep, I happen to be a very sound sleeper. In fact, my wife worries that, I'll never get up if there was ever a fire. But it's getting to sleep knowing that, did I do everything I could today that felt consistent? And then as soon as I see something that's not, I fix it, I adjust it, I jump on it. You can always apologize. You can always say I made a mistake. You can always go back a little bit. But, you always want to have that thought in your mind when you're talking about personal branding of, is this consistent with who I am? I used to do this at Boardroom at my old company, where if I was going to partner with somebody on a product or a book or anything, my criteria was it went something like this. Would our best customers for our books and newsletters be surprised if they saw our company name on this product? Or would they be pleased? Would they be surprised? Would they be flabbergasted? Would they say, yeah, that makes sense? Bottom line, should be endorsing such and such. So you put all the different, characteristics on it, and you run all those things through your brain, and you realize that, as soon as something is out of integrity, you might figure it out before you make the deal. And we were pretty good. We had a pretty good track record of putting our name on stuff and not having tons of people in our audience say, why the hell are you endorsing that? Why the hell are you doing that? That's not who you were about. And it happened a few times, and then we apologized, and then we realized we might have made a mistake. But for the most part, we understood, what the consistency looked like. And everybody, it's different for every person, for every brand, for every company. And again, my criteria is, how well am I sleeping?
I think that's a really good criteria too, because in all, even if you don't necessarily notice you're not resonating with your customers, they notice because they can feel it. And the best example I can give of that is, unfortunately, probably everyone has come across a bad or maybe sleazy salesperson, and it'll probably resonate with you that it just didn't feel right, and that's why you didn't buy, even if all of the logical stuff made sense. And people can feel it if you're not being genuine.
Yes. People will pick up on it. You really, and that's why it's always important. One of the things in our book that Craig and I do, that is that the emphasis on research that all ththese guys talked about, all 6 of these legends, they really understood their customers. They really understood their prospects. Gene Schwartz has some great quotes about how, walk around among the masses, ask questions, know what people are thinking, understand what's happening in culture. Interestingly, Gene was one of the most well-read men in the world. I don't know anybody who read more than Gene, from scientific journals to novels to, direct marketing books to other business books to art. He was an art collector, and his favorite publication was the National Enquirer. Why? He always wanted to know what the masses were thinking, like what's popular culture. Because when he was writing copy or developing products, he really wanted to know what was making people tick.
Once you know that, then it becomes pretty easy to create products and develop a marketing message around what they want. And from that standpoint too, going back to the moral issue we were talking about earlier, if you know what they want, you're making it easier for them to get it, then what's wrong with that? You're providing a valuable service, and people will happily pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, I want to make sure that folks know that not only, could they get this book, but what Craig and I decided to do in the spirit of over-delivery and what direct marketing is all about, you can go on Amazon and buy it, but there's a much better way to do it, because we created this page, thelegendsbook.com, where, and again, this is again very consistent with what I do. So the book is, I don't know, $13 on Amazon. So, you know, I don't make any money on that. Nor do I make any money when they go to thelegendsbook.com. But what they get when they go to thelegendsbook.com, which is consistent with my mission of making sure that you're not just getting the book, but you're getting a lot of support materials, that there's a swipe file of all of the best ads from these 6 legends on that site. It's like 150 pages of their best ads. And swipe files are just so valuable because you learn so much from them by seeing what the greats wrote in the past and how you can develop copy platforms for yourself going forward. And then in addition, there are videos of 3 of the greats, Halbert, Schwartz, and Ogilvy. In fact, there's a video of David Ogilvy on the David Letterman show in the late 90s, which is kind of cool. And then we have a downloadable, you talked about scientific advertising before, we created a PDF of the book, and it's a version of the book from a present-day copywriter, Bob Bly, and it's called the Illustrated and Annotated Version of Scientific Advertising. So it's a PDF. You can download it. Bob gave us permission to give it away. Fantastic giveaway in and of itself. So all of that is free. When you go to thelegendsbook.com, it'll give you instructions to go buy the book, send the receipt to an email, and then you get all of these things for free in addition to getting the book for a ridiculously low price, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah, and I do have to personally say I've watched all the videos, and that edition of scientific advertising is fantastic. I still had to look up a lot of the words, but it's a little bit easier to read, and it's great to be able to see some of the ads that they're actually referring to, because it makes a lot more sense, since some of those brands have morphed into other ones over the years. But I mean, if for no other reason to pick up the book, the bonuses are fantastic, as well as the video content. I think there's almost 6 hours of video content that you have there. And while I was waiting for it to come in the mail, I watched those, and it's fantastic content.
Thank you. We're really proud of it. Again, I think that it was a very funny, just to give you a sense of what things aren't getting taught properly. There was someone posted about my book in a Facebook group, and I was getting some nice comments, great book, congratulations, blah, 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 the usual. And someone posted and said, this is funny, it said something like, wow, I saw all the giveaways at thelegendsbook.com, and it's amazing that, Craig and Brian think that they have to give away so much stuff to get people to buy the book. I guess the book's not that good. And it didn't say those exact words, but it was basically insinuating that, Craig and I needed to cover up for an inferior book by giving away all of these incredible premiums. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, I'm not going to get angry at this guy. I mean, that would be stupid. So what I did was I turned it into a teaching moment, which I love to do. And I posted and said, look, you're entitled to your opinion, but I am really proud of this book, as is Craig. And frankly, it's actually consistent with direct marketing, a direct marketing rule of thumb of giving away more than the customer ever would have expected in bonuses and premiums. And then I kind of just, then the humble brag, which was, I sold millions of books at Boardroom over, 3 decades. And we never would go out with a book that I was totally proud of. I mean, we did great health books and finance books, but I never would go out, even with the book that was the best book I ever did, without tons of premiums and tons of bonus reports. And because the audience deserved more when they were ordering, And now part of that is, but wait, there's more mentality of direct marketing. But it's bigger than that. It's about total over delivery for the customer. And so I turned it into a teaching moment. And so without getting nasty at the guy then comes back and says, he didn't say oh, now I understand. He said, I'm glad you pointed that out. or something like that. And what happened because of that, and then a couple of people told him in the Facebook group that he was an idiot, which I thought was wrong. I mean, you don't call the guy out. He didn't understand the concept. So without being, I was a little, tongue in cheek about, that I sold all these books at Boardroom using premiums, but some people really went nasty on him, and I thought that was wrong. But because people went nasty on him, and because they're all probably coming to my defense, which I didn't need, we immediately sold 30 books. Like I could see the sales of the books through the website, and it just goes to show you that sometimes the teaching. I think the teaching moment. It wasn't the controversy. I think it was the teaching moment that got people to understand how important this stuff was, and psychologically, as Cialdini would say, it was a persuasive moment that got them to go buy the book. And I just found that to be one of the most fascinating little things that happened in the process of doing the legendsbook.com site with all the giveaways. I thought your audience might be interested in that story.
Yeah, I think so too, because for some of them, they'll probably have very similar offers or situations. Because I never looked at it as, oh, this is a great incentive to buy the book. I actually didn't know about the Legends site until after I'd purchased the book, and for me, it was wow, this is an incredible value, because I wasn't really familiar with you when I had initially purchased the book. I knew some of your experience, and I saw that you had sold a lot of products going into the billions of dollar range in sales. So I figured this guy must know what he's talking about, so I'll check it out. And then as I delved into it, it was quite eye-opening for me, and it was more like, this guy's the real deal, and he's doing this because he wants to provide value for the next generation of marketers, not you're trying to hawk something and you're giving away free stuff.
Yeah, and I think that total transparency. So what's in it for me, right? People are asking, okay, this guy's too good to be true. What the hell is he doing all this for? And so here's the deal. You get all these free things. You buy my book. You're on my list. I blog every week. At some point, when I republish Breakthrough Advertising, I'm going to offer it to you. If you don't want to buy it, that's fine. I'm not going to hawk you for 6 weeks to make you buy the book, which is, would be silly if you didn't buy the book, but that's okay. And you know what? I may do a live event. I did a huge live event in 2014 called the Titans of Direct Response, when I had all the greats from direct marketing of the last 50 years speak. And if I create events like that in the future, my list is going to hear about it first. If I create mastermind groups, which I have 2 of them now, but if I create groups that might be applicable to people on my list, the people on my list are going to be the first to hear about it and probably get the best deal. So, and if I sell nothing to you, if you buy my book for $13 or whatever it is, you opt into my list, you get all those giveaways for free, you read my blog every week, every Sunday morning for the next 5 years, and never buy a thing from me, I'm cool with that. And you know what? If someday you do want to come to an event that I host, or you want to buy a book from a friend of mine who is doing a book on the history of direct marketing or something like that, or you want to buy Breakthrough Advertising from me, that's good too. And so if you go into it with an attitude of, I'm not going to squeeze every last dollar out of every person because they went onto my list, but everything is not a revenue event, but everything is a relationship event. That's what online marketing has taught me. And so, ultimately I need to create revenue. Remember I said I want to sleep at night. I got to have a bed, right? I got to eat. I'm not doing this. I'm not a nonprofit. I give a lot to charity, but that doesn't mean I'm a nonprofit. I need to make money too. I'm an entrepreneur. So I like doing it this way because it's totally congruent, and maybe people on this call now get a sense of how I built my own personal brand.
Yeah, and I think there's a good lesson in really what you just said, because it it gave a glimpse into your entire business, and not just selling one product as a sales funnel. Because I think that that's a folly that a lot of internet marketers fall into, is they've just got one product, they haven't really built a brand, and they have nothing else to sell. Where you're using the book almost as a lead generation, you're giving away a ton of value, so you're positioning yourself as an expert, and then just by the natural occurrence, the next step is, if someone really valued what they did, what you did, and what you provided, then it would just be natural for them to want to come to an event. So it's pretty awesome to be able to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Brian, it was fantastic to do this interview with you. Is there any last thing you'd like to leave the audience with?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we got into the issues I think you wanted to get into in personal branding, and why a book about six dead guys. The interview I did with Perry Marshall, he called it Six Dead Guys and One Marketing Legend. So of course I told him he was the marketing legend, not me. But the idea of six, and then I did a presentation recently, and I said, because these guys are like the original Mad Men, the Mad Men of the night. Some of them, were in the advertising agencies in the 50s and 60s that the show Mad Men was based on. So I think my title was something like, it was like Six Eternal Truths from Six Dead Mad Men, because I did one eternal truth per Mad Men from the book in a 10-minute talk that I did recently. And so I think that, this idea of understanding where the original source of our knowledge came from is really underrated in the educational process. Terry and I got into this in the interview I did with him, and he's such a huge believer in, if you understand if you understand some of the things that are online today, like funnels, for example, and you understand like lifetime value and basic direct marketing premises first, your understanding of how to do funnels better and more completely is only going to be better. If you understood direct mail modeling at its core in direct, the way we talk about it in list segmentation, you're only going to be better in doing profiles on Facebook when you're advertising on Facebook, because you'll ask different questions, you'll have a different context. So this idea of really understanding original source and the context, I think, is underrated, and it's really why, I said yes to do this book with Craig, and I'm proud I did. And now I'm going to continue to keep writing and telling stories. And again, I just love that thing that Cialdini told me, because I just saw him speak recently, that no one can argue with your stories. So I'll just keep telling my stories so people can't argue with me.